Hey everyone, we all know Air Force One is responsible for transporting the President of the United States. So in today's video, I'm going to break down 15 amazing facts about Air Force One. Let's begin. Number 15. Air Force One has 3 floors. On most large aircraft, you can expect to have one large main floor with lots of seats. However, Air Force One has 3. Boasting a ridiculously large 3,000 square feet of floor space, Air Force One can fit quite a few people. And in case you get tired of speaking with the President or partaking in an official meeting, you can step out of its large office or conference room and go to its gym to let off some steam. However, given the fact that you're high up in the air, it's a little more than likely that your workout may be interrupted by a bit of turbulence. However, I'd still say that shaky workout is better than no workout at all. In any case, I think it goes without saying that it would be pretty cool to explore the floors of Air Force One. Number 14. The cost. When it comes to costs to buy and fly Air Force One, this is public information. However, because the costs are so high, they are something that the US government doesn't exactly like to brag about. You see, in order to buy one of the new Boeings that will be used in the Air Force One program, the total cost will come in at a whopping $5.3 billion. And in order for Air Force One to fly, the cost comes in at an astonishing $177,000 per hour. Yet, given how important they are to the U.S. government operations, these expenses have been deemed to be reasonable by the feds. Number 13. Multiple call signs. When you think of the word Air Force One, chances are that a massive presidential plane comes to mind. However, while it's true that the president tends to use his upgraded Boeing 747-200 for many of his flights, it's technically possible that there are hundreds of planes that can officially be known as Air Force One. This is because Air Force One isn't the actual name of any one plane, but a call sign given by the Air Force to any plane that the president happens to be in. This means that there are many planes out there that could receive that prestigious call sign. And while they lose it as soon as the president steps off, I think you'd agree that being able to transport a president even one time would make a plane far more valuable. Number 12. 85 phones. Never mind about just having 2 phones. On Air Force One, the president boasts a lineup of 85. While this may sound a little bit ridiculous, it's been reported that these are split between phones and multi-frequency radios. And while many are non-classified and for regular use, others have classified uses that have not been divulged to the public. Beyond the phone situation, the plane also has a top-of-the-line communications suite that's apparently so top-notch that it could operate as a command center for military operations in wartime. In addition to this, it should come as no surprise that Air Force One has a top-of-the-line Wi-Fi system, thank God, with this service being provided by the company Viasat. So yeah, there are few aircraft out there quite as well connected as Air Force One. Number 11. Beer runs. Okay, generally speaking, the president takes Air Force One when he's out on important official business. However, Gerald Ford was an entirely different animal. While not known for being one of the best presidents, what he is well known for is for his love of Coors branded beer. However, the problem that then-President Ford had was that it took about until 1985 for the beer to be available nationwide, as before this time it was only available in the western United States. So therefore, in order to get around this, he was well known for getting his crew to pick up cases of Coors and smuggle them on to Air Force One, while he did official business. He got so hooked on the stuff that on one occasion he was reportedly so desperate to get his fix that he had Air Force One fly out there to the West Coast solely to get him some beer, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money in the process. So yeah, it's fair to say Gerald Ford was a beer aficionado. Number 10. Other leaders. While this has remained classified information until after the fact, there are in fact many instances where world leaders of other nations and past presidents have taken a ride on Air Force One. For example, in 1983, President Reagan and Queen Elizabeth II toured the U.S. West Coast. In March of 2012, President Obama took British Prime Minister David Cameron to a basketball game, and in other various years, past presidents leaving office were transported to their homes as a courtesy while on a plane with the Air Force One call sign. While all of these instances were pretty low risk, perhaps the most eyebrow-raising world leader to take flight aboard Air Force One was Soviet General Secretary Leonid Brezhnev. Occurring in August of 1975, Brezhnev and then-President Ford hopped aboard the plane for a period of nearly 3.5 hours, where they spent about 80% of the time on the topic of what's been immortalized as salt. which stands for the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks. According to reports, they came to agreements while on that flight, and while some would argue that the American plane's security was compromised by letting Soviet officials on board, it ultimately proved to be the right move. Number 9. Navy One. While Air Force One and Marine One are the main call signs used for transporting the president, for a brief moment in history there was a call sign that's pretty much been forgotten: Navy One. You see, generally speaking, the president has only to land on solid ground. However, after the invasion of Iraq in 2003, the decision was made for the then President George W. Bush to land on an aircraft carrier known as the USS Abraham Lincoln. In order to do so, he made use of a legendary aircraft known as the Lockheed S-3 Viking. An unsung hero of the Cold War, this anti-submarine aircraft would have been at the front lines had the Soviet Union attacked the United States with its nuclear submarine fleet, making it a fitting plane for Bush to use given his family's extensive military background. In any case, the Lockheed S-3 Viking is relevant for this story because it played a very symbolic role. This is because the whole reason why President Bush wanted to land on an aircraft carrier was so that he could emulate his father, who did the same thing as a serviceman during World War II. As such, on May 1st of 2003, the president disembarked on Navy One, greeted sailors aboard the Abraham Lincoln, delivering his mission accomplished speech announcing the end of major combat operations in New York, and subsequently flew home. Number 8. The Doomsday Planes. While the Air Force One planes may be some of the most famous in the American Army, it's the Doomsday plane that's arguably the most capable. With a total of at least 4 in existence, their role is to always follow Air Force One so they can pick up the president in case there's ever a massive catastrophe. While many of the details that surround it are classified information, what is known is that they're a set of EB-4 Advanced Airborne Command Posts. They were first developed at the height of the Cold War, and they're a combined aerial nuclear bunker and command center, and they feature a vast array of defense mechanisms, which include protection against thermal and nuclear radiation, the ability to withstand electromagnetic pulses, and a communication system that is reportedly the best on the planet. Considered to be the best plane for the president to be in the event of a nuclear attack, they also serve as flying war rooms staffed by dozens of military analysts, strategists, and communication aides who would guide the president through the first days of a hypothetical nuclear war. As such, these planes truly are incredible. However, despite being incredible, it's not entirely clear what rotation of planes is used, as while the Air Force does not keep their Doomsday planes a complete secret, they have rarely made any comment about them. And there are some aircraft in the Doomsday Squad that the Air Force will not even publicly acknowledge having in their arsenal. Yet given how important they are to U.S. national security, that's probably for the best. Number 7. Marine One. While most people envision a Boeing 747-200 when they think about Air Force One, there's an entirely different call sign known as Marine One that more or less does the exact same job. You see, while Air Force One is great for long-haul flights, it's quite annoying to fire up when the president needs to move around domestically. As a result, he'll often travel in the less expensive and more hassle-free alternative known as Marine One. Consisting of a high-security helicopter rather than a plane, Marine One is accompanied by Marine Two for the vice president, and the helicopters in question are HMX-1 Nighthawks that either use large Sikorsky VH-3D Sea King helicopters or the newer, smaller VH-60N White Hawk helicopters as their base. In either case, they are usually as many as 5 helicopters used, as all the ones not carrying the president will typically act as decoys, shuffling around with the presidential helicopter in order to obscure which one he's truly in. Yet the security measures don't stop there. That's because Marine One is also equipped with anti-missile countermeasures such as flares to counter heat-seeking missiles, chaff to counter radar-guided missiles, and an infrared jammer in order to protect against infrared missiles. In addition to this, every member of HMX-1 is required to pass a specialized Yankee White background check before touching any of the helicopters used for presidential travel, ensuring that both the helicopter's equipment and the president himself cannot be tampered with. When taken as an entire package, it's clear that these countermeasures ensure that a president's flight from place to place is as safe and efficient as possible. Number 6. Supersonic. While it's important for Air Force One to be fast, it also has to be comfortable. After all, it's often the site of important meetings between members of the U.S. government, Secret Service, and defense agencies. And until now, that's meant that the plane has usually only reached a certain speed before needing to slow down. However, the US government has had an interest in having a supersonic plane in the Air Force One arsenal, and in order to make that type of plane a reality, they've taken some pretty substantial steps. After all, in 2020, the US Air Force signed contracts with 3 fledgling aircraft manufacturers, Boom Supersonic, Exosonic, and Hermeus. While all are solid companies, each have planes in different stages of development, and to date, Exosonic is still at the beginning stages. Hermeus has tested its Mach 5 capable hypersonic engine, and Boom has built and is testing a 1/3 scale demonstration plane. Of these, Boom is certainly the furthest along. After all, United Airlines and American Airlines both have contracts to order up to 110 Boom Overture airliners, with these planes being super cool Mach 1.7 60 to 85 passenger supersonic airliners that will likely be launched in 2029. Yet despite Boom's head start, all 3 have a shot at making it as the future presidential plane. However, it should be noted that if a Boom Overture is selected as the plane, it will have to be almost completely refitted. After all, it will require a bathroom, medical annex, 2 galleys, an entire private suite for the president, while also having the smaller luxuries associated with presidential travel. And while this may be a tall order, I'm sure that future supersonic craft will be elite. Number 5. The menu. When you get on Air Force One, one thing that you can't really predict is the food that you'll be served. That's because on every flight, the cooks on board will try to prepare a unique menu that will suit the tastes of those in attendance. While the plane has 2 kitchens, generally speaking, Air Force One chefs will prepare the meals at Joint Base Andrews and then fully cook them on board. It's within the kitchens at Joint Base Andrews that they store special things, such as a secret spice combination that apparently makes the plane's grilled meat some of the best on the planet, making it a true culinary treasure trove. On shorter flights, meals are served into bistro bags or as a hot snack, so the minimal preparation is necessary, making the process a little bit easier and simpler. Yet on longer flights, the portions are usually quite large and calorie-dense, as oftentimes the food served on Air Force One is the only meal the president and his staff will eat all day. In order to keep the food safe, there's also a requirement that everything is sourced from the United States, so that no food is either compromised or otherwise made in such a way that will upset the stomachs of those on board. It should also be noted that it's not just the menu that's secret, but the china and the glasses as well. This is because all of it has the presidential seal on it, and when it's worn out, breaks, or is otherwise put out of service, it will be destroyed rather than saved, so it doesn't get into the hands of the public. Therefore, be it the secret menu, the secret ingredients, or secret dishware, I think it's fair to say that eating on Air Force One is somewhat of a secret affair. Number 4. The photo op incident. We've all had moments that we wish others would forget, and for Air Force One, this was the photo op incident of 2009. The story goes that on the morning of April 27th, Air Force One was being accompanied by an F-16 jet fighter while out on a flight. The idea was that the F-16 would take some cool photos of Air Force One, and if this had occurred practically anywhere else, it should have been okay. However, the problem was that this flight was done at very low altitude over the upper New York Bay, and since the planes were circling around rather than moving to a destination, people on the ground began to get worried. After all, 9/11 had occurred less than 8 years earlier, and since nobody was informed about this flight, many assumed that it was a terrorist attack. Panic soon ensued as people began running into the streets as buildings promptly issued evacuations, and while nothing bad happened, the whole thing became quite a scandal. It was later revealed that the photo op flight had been orchestrated by Louis Caldera, who was serving as the director of the White House Military Office. It didn't take long for practically everyone to throw him under the bus, as New York officials called his actions stupid and borderline criminal, while the president, who had only found out about the incident afterwards, also expressed his concern. Caldera would go on to make a public statement telling reporters that, quote, "Last week I approved a mission over New York. I take responsibility for that action. While federal authorities took the proper steps to notify state and local authorities in New York and New Jersey, it's clear that the mission created confusion and disruption. I apologize and take responsibility for any distress that flight caused." End quote. While he was not fired immediately, it should come as little surprise that the whole incident put him in a bit of hot water. He was ultimately replaced a few months later in October of 2009. Number 3. The Boeing C-17 Globemaster III. While the Air Force One call sign is usually assigned to one of the Boeing 747-200s, the lesser-known Boeing C-17 Globemaster III is a mega vehicle that's gotten a nod on occasion. Now, the reason why this plane is needed, it can be traced back to the president's on-the-ground transportation. As many of you may know, the president often rides around in the Beast, which is a super tough limo that is, by many accounts, the most impregnable vehicle on the planet. Unsurprisingly, all of this is quite hefty, and as a result, a limo can't just be tossed into a shipping container when required overseas. Instead, the Beast has to be just as mobile as the president is, and this means that a Boeing C-17 Globemaster III cargo plane is often used to ensure that this is the case. Beyond its use in transporting the Beast, it's also used to carry other vehicles in the presidential motorcade, and there have been even several occasions that, for one reason or another, the C-17 has been used to transport the president himself. As a result, this massive plane is really quite important. If we take a deeper dive into the specs, it's not hard to see why it's such a high-performing vehicle. First instated into the U.S. Air Force in 1995, it has the ability to transport over 77,000 kilograms of weight. For reference, that's enough to accommodate about 15 fully grown African elephants. This is possible thanks to the power it receives from its Pratt & Whitney turbofan engines, with these being so strong that the plane can reach speeds of Mach 0.875 despite its large size. The plane also has a range of about 4,500 kilometers, which means that it can travel fully loaded from London, England to Mumbai, India without requiring a refuel. As a result, it goes without saying that the C-17 is incredible. Number 2. They'll soon be replaced. While the airplanes of Air Force One have been around for a while, they're starting to get a tad bit dated. After all, they were built decades ago, and so in order to ensure that the latest tech is behind the president's safety, Boeing was awarded with a $3.9 billion contract to build Air Force One's replacement planes in 2018. The idea is that Boeing will deliver 2 flight-ready aircraft to the president by 2024, and while there will be many similarities, there will also be a few changes. Instead of being older Boeing 747-200s, these planes will be the latest generation Boeing 747-800s. And while many of the substantive changes are classified, what we do know is that the new plane will have an updated defense system, enhanced communication, and far lower operating costs when compared to the older model. On the other hand, a few things about the plane have actually gotten worse. One of the most concerning is that the new plane will not have air-to-air refueling capabilities. Hopefully this won't prove to be a problem. After all, last time around it was never used. However, if for whatever reason the president will be safer in the air than on the ground, this would be a necessary feature in keeping him safe, meaning that not having air-to-air refueling may come back to bite Air Force One in the butt. There was also a lot of talk about changing the color scheme. After all, the original plan under Donald Trump was to move away from Air Force One's traditionally white and light blue color scheme to one that prominently shows red, white, and blue, making the planes a bit more patriotic than their predecessors. However, since this was apparently a lot more expensive than keeping the old scheme, Joe Biden decided to cancel that change, meaning that the new planes will be the same color as the old ones. In any case, I'm sure that the new planes will be an update to the old ones in most respects, and I'm kind of excited to see what Boeing rolls out in 2024. Number 1. The first one was dumped. The United States is nothing if not patriotic, and so it's standard practice for all American military and presidential paraphernalia to be treasured. But for the very first Air Force One, this simply wasn't the case. You see, the very first airplane to officially serve as Air Force One was the Columbine II. Rolled off at Lockheed Martin's assembly line in Burbank, California on December 22, 1948, it saw use in 1952 for a presidential trip to Korea, and after undergoing a year of upgrades, continued to be used as the presidential airplane. After these new upgrades, the plane had a mahogany desk and a phone that could connect landlines at airport terminals, allowing it to better suit the busy lifestyle of the president. It was while Eisenhower used this plane that the Columbine II became the first plane to officially use the Air Force One call sign. Although unfortunately it didn't last for long, since the plane could only hold up to 16 people. Eisenhower quickly got to work financing an upgrade, and in 1954 he dumped the Columbine II in favor of Lockheed's Super Constellation. After Eisenhower's dismissal of the aircraft, it continued to serve with the United States Air Force until it was retired and put into storage during the late 1960s. It lay there, forgotten for years, until it was sold as part of a package lot to Wyoming businessman Mel Chrysler. This made it the first and only presidential vehicle to be sold privately, and after acquiring it, he made it airworthy in 1989. However, in 2003 it was flown into Marana Regional Airport in Arizona and more or less abandoned, and the owner has since considered melting it down for scrap. This was not too great of a look. After all, the Columbine II should be treated as a priceless piece of memorabilia, but because it was forgotten, it degraded into terrible shape. However, in the metaphorical final hour, the Smithsonian stepped in. After informing the owner that his plane was in fact a former presidential aircraft, he attempted to sell it at auction, and while it had no buyers the first time around, he sold it to firm Dynamic Aviation for a price of less than $1.5 million in 2016. That company then got to work on restoring the plane. This proved to be a pretty gargantuan task. After all, the once elegant 32,000-kilogram plane had now sunk 6 inches into the sandy soil and was covered in an oily grime and filled with birds, rattlesnakes, and scorpions. However, they eventually got it up and running, and while it costs a sizable sum of about $500,000 a year to maintain it, many would say that that's justified. I'll see you next time.
Watch our Vehicles playlist for more top 15 videos about amazing vehicles. Sit back, relax, and binge watch all of our best vehicle videos.